Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Glow Education Series. I'm giving everyone a moment to just get into the meeting. We are so glad that you are here. Welcome. I'm going to give a few more seconds for people to filter in, and then I will get us kicked off. I hope everyone's having a little bit of lunch while they're able to join us here at Glow. Okay. Welcome to Grove's Learning Organization. We are just so excited to have you all here today for our first Glow Education series of the school year. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce myself and let you know a few of the opportunities that we have coming up for families and professionals to engage with Glow. And then I'm going to introduce our presenters and just go over a few housekeeping items. So I am Nancy Stegretti. I'm our Director of Growth and Enrollment here at Glow, and I have the really great honor of working alongside our teams of professionals in our Learning Center and our admissions and enrollment departments in the Academy. We have a really wonderful and robust calendar of opportunities to engage with our organization and explore Academy and Learning Center this year. One thing I'll just note is that we have quite a few upcoming events for Grove's Academy to explore admissions this fall, and we would love to see you there if it's something that has been on your mind or you would like to see our school and our students in action. Our first open house of the year is in November, and you get to see our newly renovated Academy, our students in action, talk to school leadership, teachers, and current families. So that's a really great event. If you've never been to us before, it's a great opportunity to really see everything in action. To see that, as well as all of our upcoming events, including more of these webinars and education series, please visit our website for a full calendar of events and registration opportunities. And of course, you can always get in touch with us. So just a few housekeeping items. To help us stay on schedule, your camera and your microphone have been turned off. And our panel of presenters will present, and then we're going to take some questions at the end. I will be here the whole time to answer questions in the chat if you're having difficulty, or to support our presenters along the way and to keep us on time. When it's time for questions, we ask that you please use the chat function to submit your questions. I will moderate those. And so you can ask questions anytime throughout the presentation in that chat, but we won't answer them till the end, or you can ask them at the end. We'll be sending a recording of the presentation after the presentation via email, so please don't feel like you have to write everything down. That will be available to you. Now, I am very proud and pleased to introduce our panel. We have today with us Francine Lee, who is the National Director of Education with Newport Healthcare, and she's joined by Katie Richberg, who is the Advanced Clinical Outreach Specialist at Newport Healthcare. Francine and Katie, welcome. I will hand it over to Katie to get us going.
Well, thank you so much. We're so thrilled to be here with you. And thank you here at Grove's Learning Organization for this opportunity to bring this important information to people. So I'll just give a little bit of information about Newport Healthcare so folks can kind of understand what we do and why it's an incredible resource to families. So Newport Healthcare, we provide mental health residential treatment for teens and young adults. We see kids with kind of a myriad of different mental health needs, including trauma, anxiety, depression, self-interest behaviors, and we bring them into a residential component treatment program that brings in a very holistic look and integrated approach. So we have psychiatry, we have dietitians on our staff, psychologists, counseling, everything is around kind of creating opportunities for young people to have a solid connection with themselves and other things that kind of make up who they are. So we do individual treatment therapy. So we'll be addressing those anxieties, depression, etc. We bring in attachment-based family therapy, so the whole family can get treatment. It's a very systems-based approach, and we're allowed, families to get that level of healing as well. We bring in experiential learning, so equine therapy with horses, trauma-informed yoga, mixed martial arts that addresses some body, also music, art therapy, lots of different ways to have that clinically robust programming. And then also we invest in individualized programming that brings in education. And that's where Francine is going to share a lot more about the work that we have and our expertise there. And so everyone has their own individual education plan. And so that might work on executive functioning skills, time management, working with the school system, getting kids credit current or staying credit current in our program. So that, we're looking at a very holistic look at getting treatment for these young people when they're in our care. So with that, I just encourage anybody to look at our website if you want to know more information, and we can look at our outcomes. We definitely invest deeply in that. So thank you so much to Francine for your time and expertise, and I'll allow you to take it over from here. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Nancy, for the intros. And my name is Francine Lee, National Director of Education. I've been with the organization for 14 years. And the reason I stay is, what Katie mentioned, which is that our program takes truly a holistic approach to the student, really seeking to understand all the components of what creates, a healthy environment, what creates an opportunity for the student to show up and feel successful in any setting, whether it's school, at home, with peers. So when I was kind of brainstorming what topics to talk about for this opportunity today, one of the comments I made, and something I say often with the families that admit to our program, is that so often we use report cards as the thermometer to assess, how well a student is doing in school, where, we do understand, good grades may reflect, proper engagement in school, but there's so much beyond that piece of paper and so much beyond those 5 courses they might be taking that could indicate, what might exist in terms of like deficiencies and areas that we need to target and support in order to sustain, that success for the student beyond the school experience. So today, we will be talking about the relationship between school achievement and how that impacts mental health and vice versa. We'll be defining what really the holistic student success can look like for the child. We'll be talking about early warning signs, progressing to red flags, taking a deeper dive into what healthy student engagement really looks like. We'll talk about the ABCs there. And lastly, we'll be talking about how to take a more insightful approach and more thorough approach in identifying and assessing those development areas for the student and how to properly plan for the ways to address those concerns as well. So I wanted to warm up by going through an interactive practice with you all. So if you give me 1 second, going to window, there you go. All right, so Nancy, I'm gonna rely on you to confirm that you can all see the Mentimeter window pop up.
We can. It's fairly small, but we can see it.
Okay.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, so for those of you who are joining from your phone, if you could go ahead and scan the QR code, a window might pop up for you to accept cookies. Please go ahead and do so. And what I would like to start today with is using one word. Just ask and reflect on your own. How would you describe a straight A student? And there should be 2 fields. So if you feel like you can't commit to one word, you want to submit 2, go ahead and do so. And we'll give a few minutes for you all to jump on and respond. And we'll just see what pops up here. We should be seeing a sound cloud or a word cloud pop up. High achieving, smart, responsible. Anything else? Confident, dedicated, definitely. So you'll see the sizing of the words indicates like more than 1 vote. So responsible seems to be a popular one and a one that we agree upon in terms of straight A students. Confident, about the same size as responsible. High achieving. Great. So I'm seeing about 9 responses. Okay. Now shifting gears for a quick minute, I want to ask, now using one word, how would you describe a successful student? Are we using the same words? What are we thinking about in this situation? Loves learning. motivated, hardworking, positive, well-resourced. I love that one. Confident, curious, important, balanced. Feels accomplished, less stressed, important. Yeah, good points. Okay, so I'll let this run for a little bit as I talk out some of the takeaways here. So we saw a lot of similar words populate, definitely seeing some different words now that we've reframed the question, used different ways to describe the student. And I thought this would be a good way to get us in the mindset to consider all the components of what school or student success looks like. I think, again, the emphasis here is to go beyond the grades. It's not the best indicator of how healthy a student is or how they're showing up. So just keep this in mind. Thank you for participating. And I would love to show a video next. I'm going to shift back to presentation. Okay, so before I start this video, just to give a quick intro here, Middle Ground is a series where they typically pull in a few interviewees, and they usually identify with opposing spectrums of categories or populations of people. So in this episode of Middle Ground, they pulled 6 students, 3 being identified as quote unquote straight A students, and the other 3 being flunking students. And they were asked a series of questions regarding schoolwork. So they talked about, what good grades mean to them, what is their idea of hard work. They discussed barriers to success, including how their relationships with others, including adults, can either positively or negatively impact the way that they show up and the way they behave in school. And in this snippet, they are prompted with the question of what is a smart student, and to say I am smart, what does that mean to them? And I think it's a really powerful way to really just showcase how insightful our kids are. We've spent some time thinking about our perception and our idea of what a successful student is, and I just think it's important to hear from students what that is to them.
There's so many things that define smart, and it's not just being book smart or street smart, it's smart, just knowledge. And I have a lot of knowledge and I know a lot of things, and I value that knowledge, which I think is really important also to being smart.
Yeah, I mean, it's how you use the knowledge that you have.
I am smart no matter what. Just because I'm getting an F on the test doesn't make me dumb. I can be book smart. I'm also street smart. I know my way around. I know my place and I know where I need to be.
Yeah, to say you're smart is something that everybody should be able to say in themselves. Right. Because no matter what, even if you don't feel yeah, I'm the smartest person in the room, you might not feel like that, but you're smart to yourself. You're the only person who knows how your body works and how you feel. You're educated on yourself. You're educated on the people around you, your friends, So it's you might not know something about her that I know. That doesn't make you dumb compared to me. You know what I mean? Everybody's still smart in their own way.
I feel like everybody has something to bring to the table, no matter what. At the end of the day, school's just the first start of our lives. We're stepping out, we're learning new things. And not to say grades are insignificant, but at the end of the day, they really shouldn't put such a hold of you where you cry or you're depressed or something like that, or it makes you feel dumb,
Smart is such a dumb word. It's why do we use it? I think all of you are so freaking smart. I don't give a shit about it. You're 2.0, I don't care. It's
you're
I
bright.
think,
You're bright as hell.
yeah,
it's
it's the person that matters, and I hope that all of us actually know that, because that's what's going to define us in the end. That's what's going to make you successful.
I definitely encourage you all to look up this video and watch the whole episode. I think it's also great content to show to students or to parents to really understand the way that children are thinking about their school experience, the way that they're creating this self-narrative about themselves as students. These kids are so insightful. I was just thinking it'd be so interesting to meet with them, have coffee, and just kind of talk through what they've experienced in high school. And I love the way that they found ways to connect with each other and relate their experience despite different backgrounds and different academic capabilities. It's just really cool to watch. So again, I encourage you to look up this video. And I'm seeing questions about sharing the video link. I think some people may have been unable to hear. So yes, that will all be provided. It's also in the references of this PowerPoint. And so we'll make sure to get all of this content out to you all as well. So we're going to take a step back and really just talk about the bidirectional relationship between school achievement and mental health mental well-being. There are a ton of studies that have been done historically at the adolescent level and also at the young adult level too. And I feel like most of the times what you end up seeing in terms of results is this like ability to predict school achievement or school performance based on how they present with mental health issues or struggles. And so really like what you see is trying to find predictors, like if a student exhibits poor mental health symptoms, they're likely to have lower GPAs, they're less likely to advance to higher education. But I think it's important to question, and people are starting to question, and there's emerging research to study the fact that it goes both ways, right? We recognize that mental health issues can interfere with how students perform in school, but isn't it possible that the way that they're experiencing school is also impacting their overall mental health? And again, so that's kind of like the question, the mindset I want to take going into today is understanding how school pressures and the school experience can negatively or positively impact mental health, and it's not just the other way around. Challenge Success is a nonprofit associated with Stanford University. They've conducted some surveys over the last decade to really understand from the student perspective, what are they feeling? What are they experiencing? And in 2018, they surveyed around 43,000 students, and the outcome was that 75% of high school students and 50% of middle school students often or always feel stress. And I thought that was just such a stark number and indicates like what they're really feeling like when they go to school. In a separate study between 2010 and 2023, they surveyed over 270,000 students using a well-being survey. And here, 75% of the kids reported exhaustion, difficulty with sleeping. They have headaches because of stress. Even more unfortunate, only 42% felt that they could be themselves at school authentically, and only 40% felt like they were part of that school community. And I came across this statement on their website, and it says, students shouldn't have to choose between doing well and being well, and that just really resonated with me, and is another reminder that we need to be looking at how to mend these two ways of thinking to really assess how well they're doing in school and how to support them if they are not. So getting into a little more of the statistics, I think a lot of you on this call are well aware that we're like in the midst of a teen mental health crisis, according to the CDC. They have reported these statistics from years 2018 and 2019. In the table, you see like as the kids get older, we're seeing an increase in diagnoses. So it's no secret that mental health issues are prevalent with our youth population. And in fact, I think it's important to mention that it progresses into young adulthood too. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, conducted a study, and they found that a staggering 73% of students encounter mental health crisis during their school years, their college years. And other further research indicates that over 60% of college students grapple with at least one mental health issue, marking a concerning 50% increase from just a decade ago. With September being the National Suicide Prevention Month, it's always important to spread awareness and really just understand the impact that mental health issues are having on our youth. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for youth in and young adults ages 10 to 24 years old and encompass 15% of all suicides. Um, Studies between 2000 and 2021 indicate that suicide rates for this age group have increased by over 50%. Regarding ED visits, girls and young women have been admitting at 2 times the rate of their peer boys and young men. And again, the rate of ED visits for girls was actually double compared to 2001. So it's really concerning. We really need to be taking the time to sit back and really look at and assess what we've been doing, what is working for our kids, and how we need to adjust and pivot to better support and provide services to our youth. So we're going to take a second to talk about what makes school challenging and what motivates them, identifying protective factors in a broad sense before we take a deeper dive into the components of student success and what proper student engagement looks like. So these shouldn't be a surprise, when we survey students and we try to better understand what makes it so hard to show up to school and to engage in school. They're worrying about how they're performing, worrying about like completing homework, getting the feedback, getting evaluated, taking exams. A lot of that is attached to personal failure and their identity and their confidence as a person, as a student. They spend time overthinking events, perseverating on peer conflict, not having the skills and tools to navigate conflict and resolve conflict with others. Relationship with adults, including their own parents, teachers, school personnel is really impactful in the way that they show up. It can be really distracting for them when they show up to school. And then, of course, you have your diagnoses and learning difficulties that obviously impact their ability to show up and participate in school. Conversely, and these are a few protective factors of really sustaining the ability for the child to show up and to continue participating, they really want an opportunity to do well at something. And this just doesn't cover, the school piece. It's the ability to engage in a sport and feel successful and feel like their skills are developing. It could be social clubs, school clubs where they're contributing in a meaningful way and feeling connected to the people around them. And that has to do with the social relationships. Are they engaging in relationships that are healthy and are improving their ways to assess and identify their values and interests and goals for their future? They really thrive with structure and consistency. And that needs to exist, not only at school, but also at home. I think the more they are engaging in routine things, the more safe and secure they feel. And with that, they're more likely to take risks and take those chances in school to create resilience, but also to continue learning about themselves and the content that they're being presented with. Positive reinforcement obviously is so important. So much is going into the way that they're developing their self-esteem and confidence. And so the more that we can identify the strengths with them and reinforce those, the more likely they are to sustain those habits over time and find success in adolescent years, young adult years, and further on. And lastly, that reinforcement is supposed to come from the adults. So the parent support and involvement is such an important piece, and just being able to manage, from the parent perspective, your expectations, and then also communicating that in a way that is helpful for the students to hear without adding pressure and really undermining, the risks that they're trying to take in a school setting. So, these categories I have here on the page are some departments and some areas that I think are really important in when we sit back and think about what defines student success. So what we'll do with each of these categories is we'll talk about signs of success. So what does that look like in a student or in a child? We'll go through some examples, obviously not inclusive of all. And I could say the same thing. We'll go through some warning signs and red flags, but what you see on the slides is not going to encompass everything to look for. It's just a few examples. I just wanted to share that disclaimer. So going first into emotional well-being, sometimes when I bring in a parent or a student, I ask them, what does emotional well-being look like for you? Sometimes their answer is, a happy student. And, while that's nice, that's not realistic. This isn't about being happy all the time. It's acknowledging that there are ups and downs. There will be struggles that come with the school experience. But the well-being piece is really about the ability for that child to manage their emotions and express their emotions in a way that's constructive and helpful for them. So, looking at self-regulation, is there a proper use of healthy coping skills to calm themselves down after feeling upset or stressed? Can they express themselves? So, are they able to articulate those feelings instead of bottling up or having outbursts at home or in the classroom space? And are they seeking support? Do they know when they need to? Are they doing it in a timely manner? Do they know who to go for help? Do they know how to ask the questions for help? And some examples include of, if a student is able to do this successfully, it might look like them coming home from school and bringing up with you an interaction they had with a peer. Maybe it was confusing for them. They didn't know what to think about it, but they're talking out loud to you. They're feeling comfortable to share, and they really are seeking support. So they're asking, like, what do you think about this situation? Like, did I do the right thing? So they're really spending time to reflect and practicing self-awareness to ensure that the next time that happens, that they are making a sound decision in addressing that and navigating that with a peer or an adult. Maybe it's an athlete. Maybe they made a mistake during a recent soccer game. And instead of beating themselves up for it, they might reach out to the coach and ask, what should I have done? What can I do better? Can we practice different drills to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Another example in the classroom space is a student who may have been offended by what a teacher said. This student is likely to self-advocate and maybe ask the teacher to talk after school and say, hey, when this happened in school today, I was embarrassed. I felt like really shamed by that. Like, is there a way that you can redirect or ask me a question next time that helps me feel comfortable with sharing in the future? So those are signs of success. Now, on the other side, what should we be looking for if there's some deficiencies in these areas? And that might look like mood swings. They might start to be isolating at home. They might start to be isolating from peers or other adults in their lives. There might be a sudden lack of interest in the hobbies and activities that they're typically engaging in. You might see occasional tardiness or absenteeism. They might be saying, I'm not feeling well. I don't want to go to school today. Maybe it's just one or twice, but it becomes, these signs, although typical for the student experience, it becomes concerning when you start to see the chronic outbursts. They're becoming more frequent. They're becoming longer. Maybe it's taking longer for them to bounce back from those upsets. The withdrawal is continuing over time. You might be seeing them completely isolate from all others, spending all their time in the room, not wanting to talk to you. And then also the scariest thing is leading to chronic school refusal. So it's like repeated days in the week, several days of school refusal and not showing up. So those are some things to look about. And again, I just want to emphasize that it's not about the child being happy all the time. It's about, recognizing that they're becoming resilient and really able to swing through those ups and downs with you or with support of other adults to really navigate those difficult situations. Moving on to social development, again, kind of like the myth is like, this isn't just about making friends. It goes obviously deeper than that. We're looking at the types of relationships they're making. Are they friends? Are they making relationships with healthy people, supportive people? Are they authentic relationships where there is mutual respect? In terms of conflict resolution, does this child know how to handle disagreements constructively rather than avoiding altogether or resorting to aggression, whether it's verbal or physical? They're able to express empathy towards others so they can understand, somebody else's perspective, respond with compassion. They're self-aware of how their actions will impact others. And they also recognize how other people engaging with them might impact, their mood or their well-being as well. So a socially developed student is somebody who might be able to listen well to others and contribute in a meaningful way in a group project at school. It's somebody who recognizes that a peer is struggling and is either reaching out to offer to support, or they're telling an adult, a trusted adult, to say, hey, I noticed Johnny is is acting differently, I'm not comfortable talking to them, but I figured, I would give you a heads up so you can see if you can talk to them or their parent. Transitioning into warning signs, this child may be having peer relationship difficulties. You might be seeing them switching from friend group to friend group or friend to friend. They might say, I had Johnny's my best friend this week. Next week, Kevin is my best friend. So just a lot of like change and inconsistency in the way that they're engaging with their peers. It could look like sudden withdrawal from social activities. I mean, that could be clubs, sports, volunteering. They might just wake up one day and say, I don't think I like playing soccer anymore, and not be able to provide, a concrete reason why. And so those are some early warning signs, and a flag for you to start asking questions and going deeper beyond how they might be presenting, what they're sharing, or what they're not sharing with you. And then shifting into the more concerning piece, you're starting to see a shift towards completely unhealthy relationships, um, different friend groups of really different interests, and engaging in behaviors that are very unlike what the child has been in the past, or again, complete isolation. So they're just really not engaging with any peers, any adults, or with you at home. Speaking of cognitive skills, the idea here is like their ability to develop a way to think and problem solve the challenges that are presented to them. And it could be like homework, it could be a social situation. We really want to be able to see that they can practice cognitive flexibility and intellectual curiosity. Is this student approaching problems in a way that is methodical? Are they considering possible solutions rather than just giving up or becoming frustrated and having an outburst? With cognitive flexibility, like, are they willing to adapt and change an approach or perspective when they recognize that it's not working? Simple example is a student who is working on a complex math problem. They've tried different methods to find a solution. They call back to maybe lessons that prior math teachers have taught them, and they're really applying what they're learning to a different situation to get to that outcome, to get to that solution. It might be a student participating in a debate where they're actively listening to the argument of the opposing side. They can take that into consideration and combine that with their opinion and their perspective and formulate a response that answers to the argument, but also is able to share and articulate their own opinion. Somebody who is intellectually curious shows a genuine interest in learning. They're asking questions to understand the concepts as opposed to just memorizing and just really understanding like what the teacher is going to ask on the test. And again, it's about that application. So they're engaging with the information even outside of the classroom, taking what they've learned, applying to a totally different situation to get to that goal that they've identified. So warning signs include struggles with problem solving. They might be having difficulty with focus. There might be new learning difficulties that have presented at higher grade levels. So this could be brand new because they're being asked to learn and to regurgitate and apply the information differently than they were in middle school. So we want to be aware of these changes, and we want to act quickly to be able to address those deficiencies. Red flags include a sudden drop in their academic performance. There may be frequent missed assignments. At this point, you may be getting contacted by teachers or the school counselor to address drops in multiple classes. Maybe it's not just one, and now we're seeing a general trend across all of the subject areas. There might be behavioral issues showing up, requiring disciplinary action, and so deans may be involved. So sometimes, those behaviors are coming up because of their frustration with their ability to cognitively engage in the coursework. So really important to be aware of these cognitive warning signs. Physical health is one of the more straightforward ones. It's really important, obviously, that students are able to maintain good physical habits, which include, sleep, diet, and regular physical activity. We know that getting enough rest supports both cognitive and emotional functioning. We experience this as adults too. I know that when I get the 4 hours of sleep versus the 6, that, like, significantly impacts my ability to be present and engaged in the following day, and so, we need to be modeling what this looks like for our kids because we experience it the same way. We know that balanced nutrition fuels both the body and the mind, so you should be asking, does this child understand the connection between what they eat and how they feel? Are they acting based on those responses, those physical responses to their changing diet? Um, and then engaging that physical activity, whether it's a sport or some general form of movement, just keeps the body active. It reduces stress. It's a good outlet for our kids and also for ourselves. I like these examples here of a student who's aware of how their physical health impacts their mental well-being, but also their academic performance. So this might be a student who prioritizes sleep and sets boundaries around studying during finals week. It could be a student who sets boundaries around devices like cell phone use, being on the internet, being on social media, and how that impacts, their mental health and their academic performance. I've seen this thing on TikTok where students are electing to go on walks, device-free walks after a hard day or like a tough situation, just to practice mindfulness and just being present with their body and being attuned to what they're feeling. Highly encourage this for you all too. I know it's hard to sometimes unplug from your devices and get back into your body, but it just goes such a long way. Transitioning into the warning signs for physical health, these are pretty obvious. The child may be struggling with their sleep schedule, and that might mean not going to sleep at the appropriate time, staying up late. It could also be going to sleep on time, but really struggling to stay asleep, waking up in the middle of the night, and just not getting the appropriate amount to really be present and awake and energized the next day. You might see a change in their eating habits. They could be eating less, could be eating more. There's unexplained fatigue. So again, like when we're seeing these, we should be asking the questions and really targeting, like, why is this happening, and talking to the kid and just really understanding what are the barriers here, what change, when did this change, how can I support you. And then obviously, the red flag is the physical health ending up impacting the mental health piece or vice versa. You might be seeing more significant psychosomatic symptoms, stomach aches, nausea, like just intense fatigue, like unable to stay awake in the classroom space or at home after dinner. So again, just some things to look out for, not a conclusive list, but these are some common things that show up with the student who is now suffering in the mental health or the physical health area. And lastly, I want to spend some time talking about identity development. At the adolescent age, a lot of time and energy is spent with these students trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to figure out what their values are in relation to parents, to peers, to other adults in their lives. They're trying to figure out who they want to become, like what careers they're interested in. Um, and a student who is engaging this appropriately and asking the right questions is really working to understand themselves, and that includes, what their strengths are. I don't like to call them weaknesses. I like to refer them as lesser strengths. So, what are the areas that I need more support with? What can I do to develop those areas? What do I like? What do I dislike? Based on their self understanding, the hope is that they're able to make value based decisions. So, they're using appropriate judgment to make decisions that align with those core values. And especially when faced with peer pressure, they're able to separate their identity with who their friends are, the people that are around them, and feel secure in the decisions and the past paths that they're choosing. Um, and their future oriented thinking. They have been able to set goals, they have aspirations for their future, even if it's evolving, and we know that it's ever evolving, but they're thinking about that, and they're also asking the questions, when they're trying to make decisions in the moment, like, "How does this impact that goal? Does this bring me closer to that endpoint? Does it further me from it? What is, like, the cost benefit analysis here? Like, is it worth it for me to engage in this behavior and make this decision?" And so some examples include, somebody who is interested in their future and really interested in finding their passions is choosing clubs, choosing social groups, choosing hobbies and passions that are aligned with those identified like self-understandings. It's a student who might decide not to engage in a risky behavior because it puts their college acceptance at risk. Maybe it puts, potential sports scholarship at risk if they were to decide to go out with friends and engage in substance use. Um, Things that we want to look out for students or children who are struggling with identity development is low self-esteem. They might be constantly comparing themselves with others, with peers, even with adults. You think about the pressure that parents might put on students in terms of like what their goals and expectations are career wise, and what the parents did, and just saying like, when I was your age and when I was a student like you, I did it this way, can also just trigger some pressure points for the student and impact their mental health and their mental well-being. Students are feeling lost, and that's with or without parent guidance. They're just unable to make decisions independently with or without, talking to and getting advice from others. And the red flag, once they start to compromise their values to fit in, is when you start to see them leading into those risky behaviors. They start withdrawing from typical activities, withdrawing from their typical peers. And then, I mentioned this is earlier, they're starting to drift towards other peers who might be making those same risky decisions with them, and really just sinking into that piece, and really not challenging why they're doing that, not asking the questions of why am I doing this? Why am I compromising? What is important to me and what values I have, just to feel like I'm part of something and connected to something. And this can show up, the risky behaviors can show up in different ways, like cheating in school. Like if they're feeling pressure to get a good grade and they're really struggling in the course, but it's so important to them to get that A or to meet the expectation of somebody else to get a good grade, they might resort to cheating. And again, I mentioned earlier, like substance use too is a way of withdrawing, avoiding, really looking at what barrier they're experiencing in any of these components of student success, as an exit, to avoid, again, really addressing and really looking at ways to work on those lesser strengths. I love talking about the ABCs of student engagement. This is something that I do very often with incoming staff, especially greener teachers, and just really looking at how to look at student engagement in the classroom in different ways. So we've got affective, or also known as emotional engagement, behavioral engagement, and cognitive engagement. We'll spend a few minutes going over each of these categories. So starting with the emotional engagement piece, this really refers to the student capacity to demonstrate their feelings about everything, ranging from what they learn to the school environment themselves. It's really their ability to identify with the school and show a sense of school belonging. Um, and I want to point out that interactions with others outside of their peers, and this includes adults, including the parents and also the school staff, can either positively or negatively impact that ability to engage in the school community. So there are studies that have been done on this around how to measure engagement, and a lot of times they use these ABCs, and some of these quotes were used with students to identify how really connected they feel. So an emotionally engaged student should be able to say, I feel like I play a real part in this school. I can contribute in a meaningful way to this school. I feel safe and happy in this environment. And I would recommend to other kids they go to my current school because I can identify why I feel safe, why I feel welcome, why I feel valued in this school environment. So I also want to note, while it's normal to have the ups and down, those up and down days at school, the emotionally engaged child can bounce back from that and recognize that I can take a generally positive approach to class because I feel like I belong and I really enjoy being here with my teachers and with my peers as well. Behavioral engagement is really like that active participation in school. They're showing up, they're attentive, they're conducting positive behaviors in the space. There aren't school attendance issues. They're ready and they're excited to show up in the classroom. They're willing to participate. They've got their hand up. They're making the effort to learn even when the concepts are difficult. They're asking questions when they don't understand. They're following the rules. Oftentimes, they can even be holding their peers accountable to following the rules and doing the right thing. And this really impacts their interest in the classroom content and their desire to exceed. Some of the questions, we talked about in the last slide, some of the questions you're asking the student or assessing yourself about the student. In this category, you might be asking, are they disrupting class? Have there been disciplinary incidents in school? Are they acting out? Are they completing the homework? Again, active participation in a way that's appropriate and healthy in the school setting. And now we move on to the last letter, C, cognitive engagement. And this has to do with the kids really taking ownership of their work and taking pride in their performance. Cognitive engagement is, the ability for the student to self-regulate and take this approach to learning and use, executive functioning skills, being able to think about the way they think and learn about the way they learn to find success in the classroom space. So this boils down to the value that they're putting into learning and how they're really practicing the behavioral piece, how they're regulating themselves in the classroom because they understand that it could negatively impact, their ability to engage and really understand and retain the information they're learning. It's how they apply themselves to the different subjects. And again, just to emphasize here, it's the effort they're inputting to master that information that is taught to them, and then taking it further to apply it to a setting outside of the classroom as well. So now that we've spent some time defining what both success and what struggles, what like warning signs and red flags can look like, the question becomes, what do we do with that information? So now we're picking up on the warning signs. We might be at the point of red flags. What do we do? What can we do? And how can we, as the adults in the village surrounding the child, work together as best as possible to support our kids, our students, so that they can re-engage, find confidence again, and really improve the self-esteem piece in the school setting. So what I want to do now is pivot to a video. I am pulling a snippet from a TED Talk. This woman named Lauren Parker is a school psychologist. And in the video, she's talking about the importance of viewing mental wellness and academic success as being intertwined. This is another video that I encourage you to pull up and watch in full. It's like a 20-minute video. We're going to see like 2 to 3 minutes of it in just a moment. But there's one thing she says that really, I think, speaks to what we'll get into in just a few moments. And she says, mental health lies on a continuum from mental wellness to significant mental illness, and students need support at each point on that continuum. And I think that's like so important to call out, because you might have a kid who decides like they're ready to seek help. And so they show up to the counselor's office, or they ask their mom or dad for tutor support. So that's like, that's the first instance maybe where the student is seeking support. And it's a flag to us to say, oh, they're struggling with something. Let's figure out what to do and what to help. But it doesn't stop there. We need to continue assessing and understand, in order to understand, like, is the way that we've just provided support helpful? Is it working? If not, how do we need to change the approach? It's like us practicing the cognitive flexibility too, and being intellectually curious about the student experience to best understand what the barrier is, and then accurately and appropriately prescribing a solution to that. So I'm going to transition into the video. We'll spend a few minutes watching that, and then I'm going to share some takeaways I had from watching her entire presentation.
We can build relationships through support. This means identifying academic and social emotional needs early and providing interventions continuing those interventions to ensure students develop the skills they need to learn and experience success. This means that while we are working to identify academic gaps, we are aware of any social and emotional gaps that may be emerging or widening, and we work to fill those too. It means not only focusing on areas where students struggle, but identifying areas where they are strong and building up those skills. We can create safe and supportive environments for students. If someone is struggling academically or emotionally, they need to know where to go to get help and feel empowered to go there. It is as important to get help through counseling as it is to get help through tutoring. Young people are often hesitant to reach out for academic support, which can lead to increased and ongoing stress. The same is true for counseling. And what many don't realize is that in most cases, both tutoring and counseling are temporary support needs, and neither require someone to be in extreme distress to get help. We are facing a mental health crisis in our schools and communities. And while counseling is important, it is not enough. We cannot just focus on the students. We have to critically examine our social and educational systems that are fueling the flames of this crisis. We can reflect on our own experiences and motivations to ensure we are integrating social, emotional, mental health development with our academic visions and hopes for the future. Not to build a bridge between them, but to create a path infused with both that lead our students to success. Understanding the links between mental health and academic achievement, committing to creating safe environments that empower students, and committing to innovating systems with mental wellness in mind gives us the ability to shift from yes but to yes and. A shift that could change the lives of countless young people.
So I think what I appreciated about this video and in this snippet is, her call out of needing to identify those development areas for the student while also naming their strengths and really building upon those skills. What happens oftentimes in the Newport Healthcare classrooms is, the teachers are prompted to identify those strength areas of the students, also identify those deficient areas, especially around executive functioning. And what our teachers do is really just look at how those strengths can be leveraged to build, those lesser strength areas. In fact, our teachers end up sending weekly email reports to parents, and there's an EF table where we list out the different components of those skills. So we're looking at like focus, organization, redirectability, self-advocacy, and the students are getting scored based on how they're presenting in our classrooms. And if there are students who are struggling and are scoring a little bit lower in those categories, our teachers are prompted to identify an action plan, and they share that with the parents. So not only are they aware of if focus was a struggle this week, what was the accommodation to address that focus area and to improve it and to sustain it over the next few weeks. So they get a really good picture of what's happening, what are we doing about it? Is the student responding to that approach? And if not, what are we doing for the next week? She also calls out that students need to have that safe space to begin with to ask for help. And they must feel empowered in the journey. And it's really our responsibility as adults to create those environments for them and include the kids in that support planning. So you'll see on this slide here, I have some stakeholders that are typically involved in bridging that gap between home and school. Students is obviously listed first because they need to be part of the process. We need to understand like their perception of what their experience is, what they are perceiving in terms of barriers and what they think will work for them. And we can incorporate that into what the parents feel, what the professionals feel, and we talk about it in an open space to really get to that outcome of holistic student success. So what I want to go through and spend some time on is some strategies as parents or other professionals within the industry to best approach a challenging situation with a student and how to incorporate our skills and our knowledge to create those plans. So as parents, we want to be alert to those components we've talked about today about student success and those early warning signs. We want to be proactive and address those and start asking the questions. When we don't understand and we feel confused or we feel iffy, it doesn't hurt to ask, right? We don't know unless we ask, and we want to be able to ask questions in a way that invites the student or the child to answer honestly and transparently. I find that open-ended questions work great if you have been educated on motivational interviewing. That's a great way to tackle um, a child who seems a little resistant to guidance, and really helps you with some school skills and abilities to engage them, especially when you're trying to get them to change a behavior. Um, Regarding the safe space, it's not about just like asking the question and then having them answer. It's active listening. It's listening to understand and not listening to respond. I think sometimes we get really busy, and we're like checking the boxes, right? Even in the workspace, sometimes we go through rounding and we're not spending enough time to really understand why an employee might be having a tough situation at work. We really want to be listening and searching and assessing, like, what are the warning signs? What's the connection to the way that they're presenting? And how do I be present and supportive? And how do I validate their experience? I also find that using the growth mindset with students and with the children really helps to alleviate the pressure of doing things perfectly. And it creates that space for both learning and emotional resilience, right? We're trying to teach these kids that it is okay to make mistakes. We want to make it safe for them to fail when they feel secure and they feel at liberty to take a risk in terms of education or an interest in a hobby or a sport in school. We really would just want to like reinforce the ability to be resilient, to embrace that adversity, to ask for and hear feedback, and then be able to apply it to what they're doing and into their next task. Um, and so it's really just, when it boils down to it, it's just helping them to reframe their thoughts. And a quick and easy way in terms of growth mindset, I do this often with the students that I work with, is adding yet to the end of a statement that a negative statement they might make about themselves. So, easy example, student comes in, working in Algebra 2 really is a struggle for them, and they just outright say, I am not good at math. I suck at math. I will never, like, I can't learn this math concept. And just adding the word yet at the end helps them to rethink this experience and understand that this is not fixed. There are ways to work around this. I can improve my understanding of math and my math skills by asking questions, by asking help, by practicing more. And so just adding that yet behind any type of like negative self-talk with the follow-up of like, how can I support you? What can we do to address this area where you're feeling insecure or not feeling like you have enough understanding or support to get through this? Um, and I guess, again, really important for parents to establish that open communication with others and with school staff. I think there's a lot of value in parents talking to each other, validating that experience and knowing that you're not alone and that there isn't, any shame around asking for help when it comes down to how the way that your child is presenting or showing up or performing in school. So the earlier you can target the signs, the earlier we can implement support by talking to others, by talking to school staff, the earlier we can really understand what those barriers are and then appropriately assess that solution. For support staff and clinicians like external providers, really important to gain the full picture by asking the right questions, right? We want to understand how the child is presenting in different settings of their life. What does it look like at home? What does it look like at school with social circles? Like, what are the points of contention as it relates to school? What are they saying in sessions? What are they saying to you versus a teacher? versus a parent. And so this really requires all parties and all stakeholders to be talking to each other, to be cross-checking what the student is sharing. Sometimes they're more honest with one adult versus another. And so we want to be making sure that we're talking to each other and collaborating, really communicating thoroughly and effectively with each other to get that full sense of what's going on with the kid. Again, right, it's picking up on those early warning signs and disengagement in the school piece. If we ask those questions, if we understand why the disengagement is happening in the first place, the better we can tackle targeting that student's emotional connection to the school, to the learning experience, and really rebuild their confidence and their ability to be motivated to come back to school and do it in a way that's different and feels good to them. So like I said, involving all parties to create that support plan. And once that's in place, being ready to pivot. The first plan is not always, and actually probably is never, the right plan. And so continuing those conversations after the big meeting, we have 504s in place, IEPs in place, but it's, we all know that there's an ongoing process to reassess and to make sure that the supports in place make sense for the student. And if not, what do we need to do? And again, that goes back to the student asking them, like, is this working? If not, what's the deal here? Like, what is the barrier? What is your experience? And how do you think we can do this better with you? And lastly, kind of like what we did before, we were talking about our perceptions of students that are straight A students versus successful students. And then we took a look at what students say about themselves and how they perceive themselves. So I thought it was really important to share how success is defined by students. So these bullet points report how they view different components of the school experience. And a lot of these tie back, if you remember, to those protective factors around why they would be motivated and why they decide to show up and engage in school. So successful students feel like there has been a goal set. They feel secure in setting that goal themselves independently or with the support of a staff, and they know how to achieve it. So it's not just like getting into college, it's also understanding the steps and the requirements that they need to take and be considerate of during their high school experience. There's a clear, consistent, and structured way for them to get to that end goal. And that has a lot to do with the focus, right? I think if they're in full understanding of what they want to do and how to do it, they're more likely to stay on track and they keep their eyes on the prize. And during that process, they feel nurtured. They feel like somebody else wants them to succeed and will help them to succeed. So again, as adults, it is our responsibility to check in on them and ask them, do you have any doubts here? If so, like, let's talk it out. How do you prefer to feel support from myself as a parent or from a professional? Like, what kinds of things are helpful for you to hear versus what kinds of things might trigger you and feel like I'm now applying pressure in a way that is unnecessary to your process? Again, going into the engagement, we talked about the emotional, cognitive, and behavioral engagement. Students will actively participate in class and in extracurricular activities when those considerations are considered and we've got those boxes checked in class and outside of class. We talked about the connection piece. Do students feel like they are part of the school community? And even if it's just, the clique or if it's a general sense of the school environment, it doesn't matter as long as they feel like they're authentically connected to others. And that also, again, includes people beyond their peers. It includes the teachers, the counseling staff, other professionals they're working with external to the school, and their families at home. And then last and not least, do they feel valued, right? Do they feel that others understand what their skills, their talents, abilities are? Do they understand their own values, skills, and talents? Are they being recognized? Are they being acknowledged? And do they have that opportunity to contribute on campus or at home in a way that feels appreciated by that community around them? So we are a little ahead of schedule, but what I want to do as a last interactive activity is pull up Mentimeter again. Give me 1 second. Okay, can I get confirmation that it's showing up here?
It looks like it's loading for us. Looks like we're on the way.
Okay, I've got the presentation mode pulled up. Do you see the prompt on the screen yet?
Not yet.
Okay, let's try this one more time. Are we seeing it yet?
Yep, we got it.
Perfect. Okay, so if you guys can all pull up your phones again, if you need to rescan the QR code, go ahead and do so. I'm just curious, after spending some time talking about signs of student success, components of student success, and early warning signs, I'm just curious to know, what is your takeaway? What is something that you'll do differently after today's presentation? It doesn't necessarily have to be anything new that you've learned, or maybe something you are not practicing as consistently to really support that student experience. If you'd be willing to share, they'll start populating on the screen as soon as you submit your responses. Yes, the yet comment works so well for adults too. I do it myself sometimes where I get stuck in that negative self-talk. It's not impossible. Just haven't taken the right steps and the right approach to it yet. Any other responses? In my communication with my student, I will look for signs that he is connecting with the assignments. Beautiful. Consider protective factors. Listening to hear, not listening to answer. Takes a lot of practice. Looking at my kids holistically and listening accordingly. Beautiful. Growth mindset, allow for failure. I think a lot of that has to do with modeling too. When I think about the ways that I engage with students or kids in my life, it's they're constantly watching. Despite some points of conflict with them when we think they're not listening or paying attention, they really are. They're looking to us to model what it looks like to be resilient and how to respond to situations. So we have to practice, a lot of mindfulness and our own regulation to ensure that how we respond is the way that we would hope that our kids also respond to. Okay, great. Well, thank you for sharing your responses today. I really do hope that there were some takeaways for you all today. I'm going to transition back into the PowerPoint. And at this point, if there are any questions or comments that you'd like to share, Nancy, I think you'll be proctoring that.
Here, yes. Thank you so much, Francine. That was so impactful and so much good information. This is time for questions for Francine. So we have about 20 minutes. We can use all of it. We can use some of it. So what questions can I help to answer? There's one in the chat that I'll ask in just a moment. But for those of you, if you do have a question for Francine or a scenario that you would like to discuss or feedback you'd like to share, the chat is a really great place to do that. So you can submit those now. So Francine, the first question that we have is, how do you assess for that normal teenage mood swing that we are all very familiar with versus something that's more of like, oh, whoop, warning sign, red flag? Like, how do we, in the moment, and then kind of reflect, how do we assess that difference?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a lot of it is like situational, right? It's circumstantial. And I think it always like when we're in doubt, it's asking the questions and having the courage to dig a little bit deeper. So, the mood swings is uh it's inescapable, right? With this age range. It's going to happen and different triggers will prompt that kind of response with the child, but it's like it's tracking. Sometimes it's understanding like, is this response to something that is typical for them to be triggered by? Is this out of the blue? Like, how frequent is this happening? How long is the swing happening for? And really just sitting the child down and just asking, like, hey, you know what? I noticed this week was a little rougher for you. Tuesday night, was normal. I know you had a rough day at school. You did poorly on a test, or you had an interaction with a peer, but it's Friday now, and I haven't really seen you, like, smile. You've been disengaged at the dinner table, like, what's going on? So, that's gonna be really helpful in really understanding of, like, is this a persistent issue? Is this a one-time thing? Is this appropriate to what they experienced? So just having the courage to ask those questions, and then again, if you're feeling really concerned, seeking support at the school environment. Like, are you guys seeing this in the classroom too? Is it just me at home with the child? And really gaining that bigger and more thorough understanding of what the behaviors look like in all settings.
Great, thank you. That can be so hard, of course, as a parent or a teacher for that child when you have that relationship with them, and you're trying to determine, is this normal, or are we kind of creeping into the territory of persistent concern now?
Right, and I think sometimes, like, having the parent just ask the question and to
Yeah,
begin with can be a trigger for the child.
definitely, right?
Um, so it's, making a habit of it, right? I think the more consistent you are on the check-ins and the way that you're checking in that works for the child, and you can ask them like, how can I check in on you without upsetting you? Like, what can I say? How can I approach you in order for this conversation to happen? And if right now is not a good time, you tell me when. I'm ready for you when you're ready to talk about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One practice that we have in our home is sharing what was something that was really fun today and what was something that was tough today. And we don't have teenagers in our home, but even at that low level of kind of making it a routine, but that can be harder at that teenage age range.
Yeah.
Um,
That just flagged a memory. Like, I know some of our parents here do the, like, what were the petals of the flower today and what was like the thorn inside? Let's talk about like your whole day. Like, what went well? What was troubling for you? Like, let's talk about, let's reflect together.
Yeah.
And it could be like in the car ride on the way home or over dinner. There's a lot of ways to incorporate check-ins without it feeling like you're imposing or you're being nosy with the child.
Right. Or you're having some huge discussion.
Mhm.
Another question that's coming through is, how can we make sure that extra supports don't add stress or make your learner feeling singled out?
Yeah, great question. Again, and this is something that I'm really like proud of what Newport does in the classroom setting is individualizing that support and checking in with the student, right? There is no harm and there is no shame in asking them like, was this an okay way to support you today in school? Like, if I see that you're off task, if I tap you on the shoulder, is that better? Or do you prefer for me to be more direct? Like, does it matter to you if I'm, addressing you in front of your peers? Would you rather do this one to one? Every student is so different. And I would say even a student on one day can be okay with the way that I approach them, but the next day, not going to cut it, right? So it's the frequent like, let's create a plan, let's talk about it after it's happened. And if it's working, let's great. Let's continue this. And if not, then let's think about ways to reapproach this. And again, like this is so valuable in empowering the student in this own journey, and they just get to take ownership over this experience. And, if they're appropriately engaged, they're going to pull this and what they learned from this experience with a teacher, with a parent, and apply it to a different social interaction. And it's going to work for them, and they're going to continue with that over time.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give just a moment here. If there's any other questions for Francine that we have today. Any other thoughts? And as a reminder, there were a few questions that came through. We will email out the presentation, so you will get all of that. Okay. Francine, thank you so much. Thank you so much to Newport. Just such wonderful partners for us. And we're so honored to have you in the community and serving the same families that we work with here at GLOW. So thank you for joining us today and letting us all have lunch with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I had so much fun. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you at our next GLOW Education series. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.